being live streamed. Let me pull up my channel. See what YouTube has to say. I'm a few minutes late. I didn't think I'd be able to do one tonight. It's just going to be me because I didn't have a chance to talk to anybody yet because, like I said, I didn't think I was going to be able to do one tonight. Ended up being free for 20, 30 minutes. Just wanted to do a quick one. So we'll see how many people we can get on because there's a few things I want to talk about that I've seen floating around. So I appreciate my buddy SPQR Cincinnati for being like, hey, just jump on by yourself. And I'm like, people just want to hear me. Maybe we'll see. I got one watching right now. First, Lord Vigilator, appreciate it. I was actually, if you can see, man, I'm actually like still red. I was trying to, I'm not trying, I successfully did it. I don't like the Mossberg safety switches. They're very like low profile. So I'm I replaced this one. I'm going to get one for my 500 too. And you see I got this grip sleeve on there too. That's nice. And there's like a tiny little spring and a tiny little ball in there. And they have, for some reason, Mossberg also decided to put a one-way safety screw or high security screw that you can't turn left really. You have to like back it out by like tapping it with a hammer or some nonsense. So that was already getting me a little bit like, and then once I finally got it off, the little like ball thing like fell off. And then the little piece inside that the screws into like fell inside the damn receiver. And I was just like instant like white hot rage because I was like dealing with these tiny parts. It's like, and I was just like, I instantly got like where you're like looking around for something to break, but you're like, I'm too poor, I can't break any of my shit. So I had to do a full disassembly to get it out, to get that little damn piece out. But now it's working again. And we got a much more aggressive, you can see it sticks up. Much better than the stock safety. I'm going to do that on my, and as long as you don't drop the little pieces inside there, I've actually had this for a while, SPQR, since the last couple of years, the Shockwave. This is new, the Streamlight, which is awesome on there. And I had put the recoil buffering pistol grip on here, but I didn't like the way it made it really hard. You had to come off, like your grip had to come off to touch the safety and then back on. And it's really not that hard to shoot it with the bird's head. Even with, I put slugs through this thing, buckshot, like it's stiff, you got to be ready for it. But I mean, I can handle it, especially with this strap here. So yeah, I've had this one for a couple of years, but I put the bird's head grip back on there with the rubberized grip thing, put the Streamlight on there, and now I replace the safety, and I'm gonna do that on my other one too. So prolapse is better than prolapse. It is. I'm not going to bother explaining that. If someone doesn't know what that is, go ask your mother. So how are we doing, everybody? We got 20 people watching. So I wanted to make a video about a few things because I've seen a weird amount, not even weird amount, I guess. I've sort of pared down like the amount of information I'm receiving because people are right that there's one group of people who are like being really in the prepping community, really talking about how there's too much doom and gloom and stuff out there. I don't really fall into that camp of like, we shouldn't be talking about this because it makes me sad or whatever. And I'm not saying that as like a dig at anybody because I get it. Like there's only bad news right now. And if you don't have the ability to like see that every day and process it without it pissing you off or getting you really down, then you shouldn't be looking at it every day. And then there definitely are a group of people who are taking advantage of that to be extremely hyperbolic and extremely, clickbaity to just to get views. But at the same time, like just talking about the bad news that's going on every day does not necessarily just mean that you're doing that or mean that you're a doom and gloomer. And I know a lot of people feel that way about Canadian Prepper. I don't. Like I said, I don't care about titles. If you want to make a clickbaity title, that really doesn't bother me. We all got to do what we got to do to try to get the algorithm on our side. When the content you're talking, when you're just literally talking about facts that are going on in the world and what you think is going to happen, and you're being honest about it, I don't have a problem with that. If the news is all bad, that's not your fault. But I get that people don't want to deal with that. But I kind of seen it pushing towards. There's a lot of people that now I'm seeing say that they don't think things are really getting that bad at all, and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. Actually, JJ had a really good video recently, which I definitely agree with him that like this is not the end of the world. And I'm between like him and Canadian Prepper because I definitely agree with that. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think that people in a lot of ways, especially preppers, get in this mindset that like shit, the fan is this event and afterwards it's going to be, life's going to be a certain way or whatever. And that's not the case. And I even commented on I think that video where I was saying like throughout all of the disasters of human history, the people have been getting married, people starting businesses, other than like extremely localized events, like what's happening in Ukraine, right? In certain areas, but even in Ukraine right now, literal war, like actual war going on in there. Still, a lot of people still have to go to their jobs, still have to do all the other things that they normally do. So it's very rare that even when there is a collapse, that it ends in like Mad Max. So that's what I said in that comment, was that I do think there is going to be a collapse, but life goes on. That doesn't mean that there is going to be Mad Max. And so specifically though, so like I said, I'm kind of in between on the spectrum. Like I definitely think we're going down in the financial sense. And I don't think that America is going to come out better on the other side of it. I think that certain areas will, but there's probably going to be some kind of breakup, in my opinion, over the next 15 to 20 years, certainly within the next 50 years or something. I don't see how the way our country is fractured demographically and culturally and everything, that it's just going to recover from that when you add in the economic difficulties as well. So the economic stuff is specifically what I wanted to talk about, because I don't want to get stuck into this mindset of thinking, not necessarily thinking of, but like not an echo chamber, but confirmation bias, where I look for the information that supports my idea and only look at that. So after the live stream that was on JJ, I was like, I want to look around because maybe I'm wrong about like my perception on, I don't think I was, about like China and what's going to happen with the US dollar and all that nonsense. And so I've been specifically looking for information on that. And I don't think I'm wrong on that, but you guys can let me know what you think. And the first thing that I see so basically set the stage here for everyone we got 32 people watching now. I appreciate it. To set the stage, what I'm talking about is basically the US's precarious position in terms of our reserve currency and our economic just state of affairs, financial economic state of affairs. So I think it's pretty well agreed that if the US dollar, or when the US dollar loses reserve currency, that we're going to be in a world of hurt financially. The degree to which that's going to cause problems, what kind of problems, may be, debatable. But I think everyone thinks that when that happens, or if that happens, that it would be really bad for us. The differences come in when that's going to happen and exactly how bad it's going to be. I think one of the things that people have that don't think it's going to be a big deal, or don't think it's going to happen relatively soon, coming at it from like a very Western perspective of, not realizing, like, the things that are always mentioned are, the number one is like, oh, our dollar is backed by the US military. Like, that's true, but what you're saying is no one can leave the dollar because we're going to fuck you up. And while that is true, that's been the case historically with Libya and Iraq and all these other things, which I think most of those were instigated by, the government to protect the central banking model. And that's why we ignore some countries and just go ham on others. But like, the rest of the world doesn't like that arrangement. You know what I mean? If they get, even these countries that aren't really at risk of being invaded, like, we're the bully in that situation. We're saying you can't leave the dollar because we have the biggest army and you better watch. It's like a protection racket, literally. And so I think to the degree that that pisses everybody off in the world, or people really don't, view that arrangement favorably, I think is undervalued, or just like not enough emphasis is put on that, to where there's a lot of countries that would probably not really be upset to see us take one on the nose or have to get away from that system, even if it means aligning with countries that are historically less stable, maybe shady in their own way, like China, like Russia, stuff like that. So I think that there is definitely going to be, when it becomes safe, and like, look at what happened in Afghanistan, where we kind of got embarrassed in terms of how that went down, and the fact that Russia's currently taking a lot of what NATO has to offer. And if China decides to do anything concurrently, it's going to really, if some other country wants to decide to leave the dollar, there's not really anything we'll be able to do about it at that time. And we're already seeing people move away from it, like with Brazil doing direct trade with China. And then you add into the fact that our currency itself, we're going to have to make so many dollars over the next 5 to 10 years, so many. And just look at how many we've made over the past few, like, COVID years. Like, something like, what is it, 40% of the dollars in existence? Is probably higher now, but like 2 years post-COVID, something like 40% of the dollars in existence were made in those 2 years. That is hugely exponential. And so you can talk all you want about how we're going to mess up people with our military who don't want to use dollars, but if we keep doubling or increasing by 50% every 2 years, the quality of dollars, which it's going to have to go up, I think, because of everything that's happening in the economy, that rate will probably even increase. The value of these is going to go down a lot. And even if people are forced to use them for certain things, certain trade, they're not going to want to hang on to them. So people have talked about how, like, if we buy things from other countries, we still make them use dollars. They're going to want to get rid of those right away. And especially if other countries come out with any sort of like resource-backed currency that can maintain its value. Right now, a lot of these fiat currencies don't look so bad because everything is fiat and everything's falling at the same time, not at the same rate, and that's why we see these fluctuations. But if you get something that isn't falling, it's based on real world wealth of any kind, basket of commodities. I don't really buy that anything will be gold backed specifically, simply because there just isn't enough gold. I mean, someone might decide to do that, but it's, if China thinks they've hoarded enough gold or something, but that would make gold, like, I think if someone made a literal gold backed currency, like on a global scale, gold would have to be worth like $50,000, $100,000 an ounce or something crazy. But I definitely think that any sort of commodity-backed currency, because it's not like people are stupid in all these countries. They know what's happening with the US dollar in terms of the insanely exponential creation of dollars. And that's going to happen even more with the amount that they're bailing out banks. We're going to see some more bank failures coming up. And even if they don't get to the actual point of failure, they're going to have to do all sorts of machinations and conjure up all sorts of fake money to prevent that from happening. And when that supply of dollars keeps increasing and increasing and increasing exponentially, it automatically makes them worth less. So even if people are forced to use them, like in Weimar Germany, people were forced to use marks for certain things, but they didn't hang on to them. It doesn't mean the dollar is going to just instantly go away when it stops becoming the reserve currency. It's just not going to be one that people want to hang on to, even if we still have unilateral trade deals in dollars. And I really don't see why people think it's so hard. Like, you guys tell me if you think I'm wrong, why it would be so hard to just move away from it when any alternative comes up, when the US is no longer at that point where we can just invade some country. Like Brazil, we're not invading Brazil because they decided to start doing direct trade. And so it's just these little steps, step at a time. And I'll read the chats in a minute. But another thing I think that people don't think about is that everyone always brings up the fact that, if the currency falters, that America has a ton of natural resources, which is true. We are one of the most blessed countries when it comes to like the variety and amounts of natural resources that we have. Russia's actually another one that has a surprising amount of natural resources. But the thing that people don't think about when it comes to the natural resources is that when you don't have a command economy, like a centrally controlled, like China, even Russia to an extent, but certainly something like China. And that's good. I'm glad we don't. But one of the effects of that is when, all of these resources are usually going to be owned privately. Like, it's not government farms, it's not government mines. To some extent, there might be some intertwining at this level, which is unfortunate in my mind. But when the currency falters, we may be producing all the food that we would need to feed the country. But when the American citizens are going to be sitting there and saying, I have $35K a year to spend on this stuff, and now these other countries are using another currency that's commodity backed and goes way up in relation to the dollar, they're not going to sell to the Americans. Why would you? Just like these other countries, what the US dollar has now, when you go to these other countries and you're like, man, I could buy this whole banana farm, and like, but this guy's sitting here selling bananas on the side of the road or whatever. The same thing's going to apply here. Like, why would they sell their resources, their food, at a American grocery store when they can get 3 or 4 times as much in, with the exchange rate selling somewhere else? And that's going to be true of not just food, but of other things as well. So the currency can really affect where those goods end up, because of if we get, bodied in the exchange rate because our currency finally is recognized for its true value. So that's my assessment of the matter. I think there's a lot coming that's going to be very, very damaging to the dollar. And I've always said that my timelines are the worst. It feels like this is going to be happening within the next year or two, which means it's probably happening within the next 5 to 10 years, but it's definitely happening. And all the things. I'm looking back at these videos talking that I've made. I've been on YouTube for 15 years almost, and the entire time I've been talking about stuff like this being a possibility, about when countries move away from the dollar, and they're literally doing it now. It's not a one-time event, but it's been happening, and more has happened in that regard in the past 6 months than have happened in the previous 15 years that I've been making videos. Almost 15 years, 2009, so 14 years. Pretty wild when you think about it, though. Definitely the slowest growing channel on YouTube. So I'm going to read through some of these comments. We can see if you guys have any thoughts on the matter, any questions. What's going on? What's going on? Lady T Survival, good to see you. Single shot, 12 gauge, break open. Yeah, those are great. They're invincible. Obviously, your rate of fire and your capacity is low, but they're rock solid. All right, be careful. The overlords frown on what you're streaming or what you have in your stream. Yeah, I know, but like I said, at this point, I get like 20,000 views a month. I make like $100 if I'm lucky. They've already killed me in the algorithm. And like I said, I'm the slowest. I've been on YouTube for 15 years. I've only got 50,000 subscribers. I make less views and money in the videos now than I did 8 years ago. So whatever. What are they going to do? Finally finish me off? I mean, that'd be a bummer, but it wouldn't change my life. SPQR says a lot of news is bad, but take time to look at the good things going on in your life. Look for it. It's there. Yeah, exactly. Like, find out what's going on, but try not to let it affect you. And like I'm saying, if it does, like, there's a lot of things that bother me, and so I don't do them. So if it really bothers you, check in once a month or once every 90 days to see what's going on in the world. We really don't need to be plugged in to a constant stream of news. That's what JJ was talking about in his video, about how this stuff seems so much more immediate and so much more I don't even know what the word is, pervasive, when you're seeing it every day. It's something like the school violence, where like stuff happens, it's horrible. But if you didn't hear about something that didn't happen in your state, let alone like if you only heard about your town or your state, certainly, but none of these people would think that this was so scary like they do now, because we're hearing about, not only we're hearing about everyone, we're hearing about it from every different person online. They're all talking about it for weeks or days at least. So stepping back is definitely a good idea for a lot of people. I think the next 10 years will be the most volatile in all of humanity. We are due, and this time happens with tech that can magnify horror by orders of magnitude. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's going to get that bad. I do think that within the next 5-10 years, America and the West specifically will be in a massive decline that will surpass the Great Depression for a lot of people. But like I said, even then, that's not the end of the world. Even in the Great Depression, even in Ukraine right now, even throughout World War II, people were being born, getting married, starting businesses, having jobs, other than localized areas of extreme destruction. Hopefully you'll be able to at least leave, but you have to prepare for things to continue, not just say this is the end. I don't have to worry about what's going to be happening in 5 years. You got to think the dollar is the Fed, and they have a central bank in every country. So the only way it could fall is if every country does. And every country will, I think, that uses the central banking model. And that's why we're seeing this bifurcation where the West is clinging to this fiat central bank debt-based money. And these other countries are going to be moving away from that. Countries that have been hoarding resources. Like, people talk about how China doesn't produce, it imports a lot of food, but it also is hoarding a lot of food. It's hoarding records amounts of food. It's hoarding all sorts of natural resources. It sees the writing on the wall, what our country and our politicians are failing to, either recognize or at least failing to act on. So I'm not of the opinion that China is going to become this like shining beacon of prosperity, but they are positioning themselves in a much better, more forward-looking way to at least survive in somewhat intact. Venezuela plus Iran plus China all working together for a common interest. Yeah, it's amazing how American people get people to work together that otherwise would never have. Yeah. And also people, like I said, I think people in the West and America specifically really, really underestimate how all these countries would just love to not have America be running the show anymore. Because like I've stated earlier in the podcast, the first thing people bring up is, our dollar's backed by the US military. Yeah, we're the mobsters forcing everybody to use our system. But that's the argument, is that people, you can't leave. Like, you got into the dollar system, now you can't leave. They're not happy with that. And just because China and Russia and these countries are goofy and don't do things the way we think they should be done, don't do them well in a lot of situations, they're shady in their own right for sure, doesn't mean that people, all these other non-Western countries, wouldn't rather be dealing with that at this point than being like, we're going to send 4 carrier groups over and just destroy you because you decided to try and use a resource-backed currency. They don't want to be a part of that. That's not a good system. And if you have Russia, China, Iran, India, Brazil, maybe one or two African countries, and South America or South Africa's in on it, you're talking about like over half the world's population. It's no small thing. My electricity has gone up 900% in 6 months. Where do you, oh, what's BMC saying? Oh, and he said, where does he live? Florida. Yeah, they keep raising my stuff too, but I don't know about, it hasn't gone up 600%. It's gone up by like 10 or 20% or whatever. Good evening, South Florida DCL. Lady T says, I'm going to make an underground room to sleep in during the summer so I don't have to use air conditioning, heat with wood, solar for the rest. Yeah, I actually got an evaporative cooler to work with my, not an air conditioning unit, because those do draw a ton of power. And although you can run like a window unit off of the Zender Superbase Pro system that I have, that would take, you know, a lot of its juice. And I got an evaporative cooler instead because they work really well out here. All it's running electrically is a little pump and a fan to drip some water down. And it'll, when it's so dry, you can drop the temperature of a room 15, maybe even 20 degrees. So you at least be able to get some sleep or something. SBQR, appreciate it, bro. This $10 super chat says, I think physical fitness is the foundation of preparedness, but this seems to be totally overlooked by most. What are some things you think average preppers overlook? Yeah, huge. I made videos on this before. It's been a while now. I probably need to do another one about like the type of things that people that would be like good metrics for preparedness. Simply the idea, if you have to like even load up your car with gas cans and totes full of gear in like 5 or 10 minutes, most preppers, most people, I'm not singling out preppers, but most people in general, and that includes preppers, would be absolutely smoked. I would venture to guess that 75% of the people watching this right now, and that probably includes myself, could not do like a full-on lap sprinting without being like absolutely dead, or, and let alone perform at the other end of said sprint with like accurate fire or physically fighting someone or climbing something. And I pointed that out in the video that I made, something as simple as like pulling yourself up onto a ledge, or if you're like down somewhere and someone throws you a rope, are you even able to climb up? Rucking for 5 to 10 miles with a decently heavy pack for multiple days in a row, let alone big miles like 15 to 30. Those are all things that I think most people are nowhere near being able to do at this point. I mean, at this point, the average American would struggle to not have calories for 12 hours, let alone 72 hours while doing all this other stuff I was talking about. So, Lady T says, swamp coolers don't work great in Oklahoma, just sometimes. Yeah, they didn't work for shit in Florida either. It's too humid. It has to be really dry. Sprint to full up quarter mile. No one can do that. I mean, you can track, or people do it. All high schoolers do it for sport. I've done it before. It fucking sucks. And then it's an 800 running it, sprinting an 800, right? Or is that a 400? What's a lap? I think it's an 800, right? I mean, these kids are doing them like 55 seconds or whatever. You've got girls out there doing them in sub 60 seconds. So people can do it. Yeah, of course, people train for it. And I'm not saying you should be able to do it that fast, but if you can't run for 30 to 40 seconds, like, and I mean run, then you're not in very good shape. And that's not a dig on anyone in particular. That's just a fact. Like, there's a lot of scenarios where you might have to run for a few dozen yards or a few hundred yards. And what if someone grabs your kid and starts running off with them or something? You know what I mean? Or some maniac with a knife starts chasing after you. And yeah, being able to run a lap, and I mean, like I said, run it, sprinting is not it shouldn't be a huge ask. It's definitely not easy, but it shouldn't be an impossible task. Yeah. I mean, we had dudes out there that were running, and yeah, I mean, obviously you should train for it. And I don't mean you should train necessarily like to try and make competitive times, but you should train so that you're not devastated when you do one of these like physical tasks. That's the main step, is because most people are at the point where if they went to like sprint real quick, not only would they not be able to go fast, not only would they be dead at the end of it, they'd be like injured too. I've been out there playing like kickball and see like a charity kickball tournament. People run up there, kick the ball, take 2 steps and fall over like, I'm all jacked up, because they just never do any physical activity. And it's not something you can just launch yourself into without getting injured. That's why you need to like slowly build up to it. do, wind sprint, not wind sprints, but well, yeah, wind sprints and the Tabata type stuff where you do like interval training, where you can just sprint for like 20 seconds, 10 seconds off, or even 20 seconds on, 30 seconds, whatever you want to do. Start with 10 seconds on and 30 seconds off, and then just go down. Have you seen the Meta Tactical Pistol to Rifle Conversion Kit? I have not. Then take your everyday carry sword. Appreciate it. Hawkesbury Rider says, keep up the good work. Thank you. But yeah, running is one of the things that is very difficult to do if you don't ever do it. And it's pretty quick to get into some semblance of conditioning for it, luckily. Like if you wanted to get double your lift, like a bench press or a deadlift or a squat, it's going to take a long time to see like big improvements in that as you build muscle. You can improve your cardiovascular fitness significantly over a period of a few weeks, which is great. And just getting the muscles warmed up to where you should be able to do that kind of stuff. And like I said, you don't need to be able to run competitive times, but even just running consistently at like an actual run, not just a jog, for 30 seconds to a minute is going to put you so far ahead of just the average person, that it's definitely worth being able to do. Just basic body weight stuff. All right, you guys have any thoughts about the dollar de-dollarization? We're hearing about it a lot. Definitely, I think that, like I said, I always have to step back and realize that these things take a lot longer than I always think. So if I think this feels like it's going to be happening within the next year or two, it's probably more like 5 or 10 years to where you really see the big effects. Well, like I said, Rusty says collapse ain't coming. Depends what you mean by collapse. Nothing lasts forever. And like I said, I don't believe that Mad Max is coming. I think that our currency is going to go through a change. And I think that our country is going to not exist as it does in this state in 50 years. Whether those changes happen very suddenly over the next 5 years or very slowly over the next 50 remains to be seen. But it's weird because all the people who say these things, none of them think that the US reserve currency, like the people who disagree that the de-dollarization is significant, is happening or anything, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody thinks that the US is going to maintain its reserve currency status forever. So my question would be, so what would it take for us to lose it? What would that look like when it starts to happen? And I think to answer those questions, you would realize that some of those things, at least some of them, are happening right now. But I could be wrong. I'm not Nobel Prize winning economist Paul Krugman, who thought that the internet would be as impactful as the fax machine. SBQR says, I wonder how the global dollars will return back to America and how that will affect prices in general sense. Yeah, I mean, that's another one. There's a lot of dollars out there that don't have any velocity, so they're not impacting inflation at all right now. If a lot of that trade that is in dollars now becomes one way when any other options become viable and all the dollars come back, then that will speed up the process even more. But for me, the process is more about domestically, when those issues get bad enough that we have to keep creating them. And that's forcing people, because like I said, they see the writing on the wall. So they're making alternatives because they know what we're doing with our currency. We know that we're exporting inflation and importing everything else. I have overestimated the rapid crash before. It may really happen quickly this time. Yeah, I mean, and I think there'll be certain things that happen quickly, but we're seeing the lead up to that is not, because it's been happening the entire time. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. You could look back and say it started in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve. You could say that, it started when we got off the gold standard in the 70s or whatever, but like all of those matter and none of them happened imminently. They've been happening, events like that happen closer and closer together to eventually where, like, obviously there's an exponential curve here when you talk about all the dollars in existence from 1913 to 2020 have now been doubled since 2020. Pretty wild. Yeah, and I do think that a lot of the thing that's going to make it harder for us to go through this smoothly is the fact that when you look at the US, we don't have like a nation of one specific people, one specific value system, one specific culture. There's all these different groups that don't even like each other at this point, have totally different goals in mind, and some are being massively supported by the others and aren't actually being productive. I mean, it's some crazy amount of people are net tax consumers and are existing because of transfer payments from the government, and how many businesses are only existing because of that transfer payment. So there'll be a massive shakeup. And like I said, it is. I would consider it a collapse. I am expecting what I would call a collapse, but it's not going to be, some Mad Max thing. Like Venezuela's still here, Zimbabwe is still a country. All these, Germany is still basically Germany. Went through a lot of weird stuff, but all these, still there. It didn't turn into literal apocalypse. We're just going to see a lot of weird, what's important, what's valued, and what's expensive is definitely going to change. Yeah, actual inflation is 18 to 21%. Yeah, and it's probably even more than that when you factor in just like I said, if the number of dollars has increased, it has doubled, then the inflation is 100%. The price inflation isn't yet 100% because of the money velocity isn't there with all those dollars. But I think Shadow Stats is the one who's putting out that the current inflation is somewhere around 15 to 20%, if I'm not mistaken, Rusty. By calculating it like they used to back in, the Great Depression, they've literally changed the way they calculate a lot of these things to keep the numbers down. But I think that's pretty much all I had to go over. I just want to do a quick one because I didn't think I'd be able to do one tonight. So if you guys have any last minute questions, and if you think I'm wrong about that, let me know. I'd like specific, not just I don't think it's going to happen, but if you think I'm wrong about my assessment of the dollar and how China and Russia would navigate this and create some kind of new currency option, resource-backed currency. Do you have enough ammo to cure zombification in a 10-mile radius? Well, 10-mile radius of me would, includes almost 2 million people. So no. Unfortunately, I wish, but I could put a hurting on it. Let's put it that way. 1 mile radius, I might have a shot, honestly. 10 miles, like I said, would be all Vegas metro area. Or close to it anyways. Well, half of that, I'm like near an edge. So like half of it would be desert and half of it would be half of Vegas. So maybe 1 million people. But no, I'm unfortunately, no, I don't have 1 million rounds. I don't have anywhere close to that. But I could put a hurting on some zombies. Let's put it that way. Maybe that means I need to move if I have 2 million zombies within 10 miles of me. But like I said, if I really thought we were going for like an actual collapse, I would be out in the woods with the homestead with razor wire fences and try to get 100 people to live there with me and everything. I appreciate it, John. It is looking. I didn't mess it up in my rage of trying to fix my firearm. Can you be an internet prophet and tell us when we see a family literally not be able to buy weekly staples due to the dollar collapse? All right, I'll go out on a limb and I'll make a guess because, like I said, it depends on so many things. But if you're talking about with the current amount, I think it's within the next, it's 5 years, I would say. I don't think it's within the next. It depends on what family, like I think the middle class is being squeezed. So that group is there's already some of those groups that can't do it without the government assistance. So I think it'll be when the government assistance stops. And I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be, but my guess would be within 5 years is what it feels like to me. But that is just a number I pulled out of my butt just based on how it feels and the fact that I usually guess too early. But that's why it's important to have things, valuable things. Gold, silver, of course, ammo, of course, food, definitely, water, definitely, supplies, medicines, all that stuff. And especially if anything happens with China where we can't get a lot of that stuff. And it is true. I know people pointed out that we are moving to manufacture stuff from ourselves. But first of all, like I said, I think people underestimate how quickly that's happening. And like I mentioned earlier, I definitely think what people are really missing with that is even when we're making it ourselves, if we have really, really weak currency because people have ditched it, then they're not going to sell to the US. The same people that say that we make all this stuff ourselves are talking about how China can't sell to their own people, basically, or won't be able to if we stop, that they need us to buy it from them. It's like, why can't their own people buy it? And they could to some extent if the currencies work out that way. But when the currency is much weaker, then these people are going to sell overseas and take advantage of that exchange rate. Just like poor countries sell us coffee and everything they pay their workers almost nothing and sell to us because we give them, but to us is nothing, but to them is a lot. That's why they can pay people to dig around in a cobalt mine with their bare hands, stuff like that. I heard it told that there has been a long-term strategy to cap oil wells in the U.S. and drain other country oil reserves, and the U.S. will change to a petroleum-backed currency. That would be an interesting idea, but we have depleted our reserves. That would be smart to make some sort of resource-backed currency. Jay says, I found your biological father. He's also a YouTuber. Check out his channel, Paul Harrell. Paul Harrell is not actually my dad, but he does have a great channel. Weak currencies are only good if you are a huge exporter. Right, exactly. When you're a huge importer, everything becomes massively expensive. And that's why China has always been trying to keep their currency down. They've actually done things in the past to weaken their currency in the global stage. But when that's the opposite, they'll be able to like sell to themselves, and maybe continue their imports of food and things like that, find other people to buy. I mean, people don't realize how many natural resources Russia has. They have we remember a few months ago, we were talking about how this war in China or in Russia and Ukraine could disrupt the global grain supply because so much of it's in Russia and Ukraine, like a fifth of the world's grain is just from those two countries. Well, Russia is one of those two countries, and they might take over Ukraine. So they're going to have the ability to produce a lot of grain in the next decade, if that happens. How many extra shoes do you stock? Shoes don't last, barefoot sucks. That is very true. I actually don't stock a lot of extra shoes. I have a shitload of shoes. I just already have shoes, a lot of shoes, and I'll buy some when they're on sale. So I have a ton of shoes. But in terms of stocking them just for prepping, I do it mostly for the price to save on the money, because I don't think we're going to get to a Mad Max scenario where things just will not be available at any cost. That's possible, and I want to be ready for that. But I'm anticipating more where we're going to become a second world country. I think in 20 years to 20 to 50 years, somewhere in that time frame, the borders of our country will be different, maybe drastically different, and we're going to be more like Mexico and Russia and all these before the war, like those countries are now, like just a second world country. That's my prediction. So I have a few extra shoes. I have a couple pairs. I have a pair of Red Wings boots. It should last for a long time if I take care of them, and a few others like that. And then I have I really like Zero shoes, really lightweight, minimalist shoes. Great for your feet if you're healthy enough to be able to not have arch support and stuff. You shouldn't use arch support and comfortable cushy shoes as a prophylactic, meaning if you don't already have foot problems, you want to go as close to barefoot as possible. It actually strengthens your feet, things like that. So I have a bunch of shoes of those that are probably a little bit less protective than you would want in a major shit fan scenario. Then I also have a few pair of boots and stuff, so I definitely have enough shoes, but I don't have some massive amount. SPQR says, I kind of gave up on shoes and sandals. My feet shred anything to put them, no matter how well made. I just go barefoot 90% of the time. Yeah, and if you're at that level already, then your feet are going to be very well protected, to where all you really do need is something to protect yourself from metal and glass and things like that. But yeah, I do have Red Wings, and they should last a long time. Yeah, I agree. Arch support is for super old people only. Otherwise, it weakens your arches. Yeah, it's very similar to that. I actually know a guy who works at the VA who does prosthetics and stuff, and his PhD thesis or whatever was about how using arch support prophylactically, as a preventative measure, actually weakens your foot. It's just like putting on a cast. You think wow, with all the support, my arm is going to be strong, right? But no, your arm weakens because it atrophies. And that's the same thing that happens to your foot if you just wear this has really good arch support. The arch is what supports your foot. So when you support the arch, it actually can damage it and collapse it. So the best thing to do for foot health in that sense is to use them, and not to do crazy shit barefoot, but to actually do things that allow your toes to spread, strengthen your foot. Because people don't run right when they have extra cushy shoes too. You tend to do a heel stride that you just literally can't do when you're running barefoot. It destroy you. So you should try to get some rubber socks or deadlift slippers, something like that, and run. and find out the way you'd run basically barefoot, and that's the way you should be running, like a mid to cent or to forward stride. Is going to, for most people, will be a lot more healthy and give you a lot more longevity with your running. Now, like I said, if you have some other injury or something that, that could change it, but I got family in Queensbury, New York. I issued a permit for 600K barrels for pumping. Heel toe is bad. Yeah, very bad, especially if you're like slapping. And so you want quiet feet when you're running. You don't want to be like, pop, 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 pop. If you can do like on the balls of your feet, like the same, basically the way you would have to run barefoot. Yeah, sort of like water shoes, but they don't have to be waterproof. I look up Zero shoes. I really like them. Those are the ones I wear. I have like 5 pairs of them, all the different kinds. And obviously, I think you should have at least 1 or 2 pairs of like rugged boots, like some combat boots or some Red Wings or something like that. But in general, a good like trail running shoe, I think, is like a minimalist trail running shoe is what I really like for most outdoor stuff. Now, if I was going to go somewhere where I knew the bullets would be flying, I'd probably wear a heftier boot. But fighting chronic bronchitis, that sucks, man. Hope you get better. So let me know if you guys have any, and no one else disagrees with me, I guess, on the dollar losing its reserve currency status in the next 5 or 10 years, because I definitely want to see real arguments. And there was a little bit of that when I was on JJ's live stream. I forget the dude's name. I apologize. The one dude that I was predominantly debating on the topic, because some of the arguments, like I said, are basically like Chinese people are stupid, and I'm like, that's not a serious critique, obviously. And some of them are real, like China's importing all its food or something. I don't think it's all of it, but that's definitely a real thing to focus on. I've looked at it, and I don't think that that's as big of an issue as most people think, especially when it comes to if they end up with a more valuable currency, then that's not going to stop. So Zero shoes feel like some chemical reaction to my feet. Really interesting. Like there's something in it that you have like a rash or allergic reaction to or something. Well, there's definitely some other ones you can try out. I think, what was the other one? Lem? Are they called Lems? Those have some interesting looking ones. I think Vibram still makes some good low profile shoes. Yeah, Lems has some good, they're zero drop, like casual shoes, and boots. So those are pretty slick. I think Vibram still makes some minimalist shoes. Yeah, so check them out too. China may lose their grip on the debt that we owe them with the whole COVID situation. I mean, there's a lot going on weird with the, yeah, waders is good to have too, not in Vegas though. Yeah, don't need waders too much over here, but galoshes or some kind of like hip waders could be really useful if you're in an area where fishing could be helpful, or even if there's going to be a chance of significant flooding or anything like that. Steve Hulse is accelerating massively. 2 years max till dollars, literally history, slowly at first, then all at once. That's kind of how I feel. But like I said, I'm always too early. So I'm just literally Kentucky windaging my guesstimate, because I'm like, well, I'm always off on this side. So I'm just going to aim over here instead and say it's more like 5 years. But it could happen at any time. But it could be slowed down by, if weird things happen on a global scale that cause people to, if Europe starts to have major issues first and people in Europe flood into the dollar, temporarily strengthening it, just because there's more people, the demand for it goes up for a shorter period of time, stuff like that. Or it could happen that we have our massive banking crisis first within the next 6 months, and then that causes them to pivot and turn on the printer right then, and then all the countries are like, all right, I see where this is going. What else you got over on this side of the world? I can't hold these dollars anymore, because they're doubling them every 2 years. I just don't see how. I mean, because this is the thesis. Here's the thesis basically when it comes to the dollars. There's no way they can slow down the creation without the economy literally collapsing in like a massive deflationary spiral that would probably end up in like a Mad Max scenario. And they will not stop. They can't. So they can't stop creating the dollars. And when they're creating at this rate, people are not going to just hold on to dollars that are being doubled in quantity every couple of years. I can't see any way around that. I'm willing to, if someone can point me to how there's a third alternative. And I agree that the banking crisis, well, I don't think it's just starting. I think it's ending. But yeah, I know what you mean. I agree with the principle. I think it started, like I said, back in as early as 1913. And yeah, who knows what's going to go on by the time the 24 election starts. That could be really wild. But like I said, I don't want people to think that I'm talking doom and gloom. Like these things, you're still going to have to go to work. A lot of people, if you're lucky, you know, you won't lose your job. You're still going to have to worry about paying taxes, your kids' schooling, marriages, all that stuff. It's just going to be in a different world. Just like in Mexico and random South American countries and even random African countries and Southeast Asian countries, life goes on, you know, it just goes on differently. And we won't have this like insane prosperity and infinite choices and everything's cheap that we used to have. That's my assessment of it. Too much debt held by other countries, dollar will hold due to this. If held, key is held. If we start doubling the amount of dollars, why are they going to hold on every couple of years? Why are they going to hold on to them? Especially if an alternative pops up, they said this is backed by rare earth metals and gold and oil, whatever they want to do it with. Why would they hold on to them? Why would people keep anything in dollars? Same way people wouldn't, you know, there's probably a lot of debts held in currencies of all these other countries too. They're going to want to cash it in for something. And then if they say, you know what, I see where this is going, maybe we should use these dollars to buy something else. And then multiple people trying to do that at once, that's it right there. Then no one wants to take it. They're like, no, we're also trying to buy real stuff with our dollars. Then the value of the dollar goes way down and the price of real stuff goes way up. And yeah, petrodollar proof at that point. And I don't think gold is going to be the answer. I think gold will massively increase in nominal cost and even real, you know, purchasing power in terms of the dollar and just in general, because so many people go after it, but there's just not enough of it, especially on like an individual level, and definitely not enough on an institutional level. So I do think things like Bitcoin, a lot of money, because think about it right now. The way I was explaining this to someone else the other day too, where like at this point in my age cohort and younger, I know a lot more people that have purchased Bitcoin or some other form of cryptocurrency than have ever touched physical precious metals outside of jewelry. And they really wouldn't even know where to begin to buy it, to find out if it's real. And there's not enough anyway. Whereas all these people have purchased crypto, they already have the accounts, they've already done it. So if they see their dollars dwindling and they're like, I don't know what's going on with gold and silver, the premium, I can't find any, it's all sold out. This guy on the streets offering me, I don't know if it's real. They're just going to go into Coinbase and be like, let me just put my money in some Bitcoin or Ethereum real quick. So at least I can figure out what's going on before I lose half my value. And that doesn't mean that Bitcoin and crypto is going to last forever or is even a good place to put your money. But I do think that there's just going to be so many people it's at some point looking for a place to put their dollars. And gold's going to be an inconvenient, difficult way to do it for the average person if that process has already started. And like they don't have experience with Forex and stuff to purchase commodities. And like, what else are you going to do? You know, some of it will go into brokerage and the stock market on a nominal terms will probably go way up, and especially foreign stocks and everything. But I think a lot of it will go into crypto too, in short term at least. Electronic dollars and EMP. Yeah, I mean, you probably should hold your crypto in an offline wallet anyway, and you could put that in an EMP protected container. But if we have a massive EMP, where your dollars are, whether that's in crypto, the stock market, anything other than physical stuff, is not going to matter at that point anyway. So I see those as being two separate things. Because a massive EMP event, like that is a Mad Max shit the fan potential. So I wouldn't really care what happened to my crypto at that point because it's kind of irrelevant. But if you think it's going to be localized and you want to be able to bug out and cash it in later when you leave the country, then yeah, you can have your offline wallet protected from EMP. So it's not wiped out. I need a new gun too. SPX, yeah, and more Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin itself is not the scam. I'm not one of those people who think that it's like a Ponzi scheme. Invest in a bulletproof business plan. Yeah, any cash flow is going to be the most important thing. Production of any kind, whether that's like a home farm, a business that actually does and makes real things, all that's going to be super important and is the best way, because no matter what happens, then it can be successful. Just make sure you're not relying a ton on like things denominated in dollars, imports, stuff like that. How do you deal with taxes in the software world? I've done very little with crypto and already the taxes are like weird. So I am not the person to ask about that. It gets weird quick. And the best way to deal with crypto in the most part, and especially with the taxes, is just to buy it and hold it. And because once you start doing trades and sales and transfers and who knows where, you'd have to talk to a tax advisor about that stuff because it gets annoying. So cool. Well, I think that's all I got. I was only expecting to go for like 20 minutes, but I might have to leave soon. So I appreciate you always watching. I got almost 100 people. So thank you very much, especially when it's just me. The CBDC to be implemented in July isn't like a direct CBDC. It's a Fed now. It's for interbank stuff, but it's definitely a precursor. It's a prototype in my mind. But that's specifically, that's not retail level. It's not individual level. It's for interbank stuff for them to try to have some like flexibility and speed, but it's not for people. Cool. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments if you're watching this not live. And thank you for sure to everyone who showed up. And yeah, I think physical gold and silver is where it's at right now too, because it's really you just you have it. It's real. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will talk to you soon.